Hey guys, welcome back. It's Mark from Erickson Machine and Performance. In this video I'm going to go through how to fix a set of cases that are cracked. This had a rod bearing failure and it poked a hole through the cases. We'll zoom in for a sec so you can check it out. So if you see here, it broke through here. There's a missing part and there's actually a crack that runs up. And yeah, it stops at this web. So I'm going to go through how I prep all this, clean it, and then weld it all back together. So let's zoom out and let's get started on the video. As the usual, if you guys like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, tell us things that you want to see in future videos. So first we got to prep it, so we have to clean the brake, V it out, take the paint off, unbolt it, and we have to clean both the inside and the outside. So we'll start off just by taking it apart. So the cases I'm working on are for STXR or Ultra 150. It's the same engine. It's a Kawasaki 1200, but this repair works for really any engine, 2 or even 4-stroke. The main thing with repairing these things is 1, surface prep, 2, actually knowing how to weld aluminum, and then taking the proper steps and using the minimum amount of heat that you can while you weld them. A lot of people end up going overboard and do more damage, warping the hell out of the cases. So you have to remember, these things are, the bearing races are extremely accurate, so are the flat surfaces. So if these don't stay flat, they're going to end up leaking. You can have bearing issues, stuff like that. If you take the steps that I'm going to walk you through and you know how to weld even semi-decently, you're not going to have an issue. You're going to end up with a set of cases that are as good as new. You know, years ago when the GP 800 and GP 1200 came out, those motors were notorious for throwing rods through them, and at the time the cases were extremely expensive. So there was cases, you know, 10 or 15 years ago that I was repairing that, you know, I was basically putting a puzzle back together. There were so many pieces, but the cases were so valuable that it was worth doing it. Same thing with some older engines that are rare and difficult to find. Same with cylinders. I will go through and even make new pieces to put in and weld back together to be able to save them. But like anything, it's cost. So to spend 4 hours or 5 hours piecing a set of cases back together for something that you can buy for $100 isn't really cost effective to the customer, but when it's something more special, it is worth it. So I've said in other videos what I use to take sealant and gaskets off. I use these truing stones. You can get them at McMaster-Carr. They're pretty cheap. I use 220 grit normally, so it's great because it's a hard stone that doesn't really remove anything. It keeps everything totally flat, and you knock it off. Any silicone or gasket that's left over. And these stones are like 10 bucks. Honestly, the best gasket remover you can buy, in my opinion. Alright, so that side's clean. The main reason, if you're wondering why we're cleaning these gasket surfaces, is when we go to weld them afterwards, we have to bolt these cases together. So we don't want it pinching on silicone and having it bolted together funny and warp the cases while we're trying to keep them completely straight. So this is going to be a few part process. What we're going to end up doing, so obviously clean the cases, clean the silicone and case sealant off of them. Then we're going to end up grinding and V'ing out the crack. At that point we'll decide if the part missing is small enough for me to just build it back up with weld, or if I'm going to have to cut a small piece of aluminum to fit in there. Then we will clean it very, very well with acetone, and after that we'll weld it. Then we will go back, we'll grind it, clean it up, and put it back together, and it'll be ready to rock and roll for another few hundred hours. So with these stones, you don't have to go crazy. You just go on and it really knocks everything off quickly. There we go. Take a little brake clean. So this is the side without the crack, so we're just cleaning this side so that when it bolts together. So it's a big misconception. I know a lot of people see cases that have been repaired and they want to stay away from them. If you see a set that has been professionally repaired or somebody that knows how to weld, if done properly, you're not going to have an issue with them. If you see something that looks like somebody kind of bubble gummed it together, stay away, because you're just asking for headaches. Welding aluminum, especially cast aluminum, it's just a skill. It's the best way I can put it. You could weld billet aluminum or, nice aluminum sections. When you end up having cast aluminum from sand castings, it's just not clean, and it causes porosity on the inside. And when you go to weld, if you don't know what you're doing, it can actually come back up and cause all kinds of issues for you. So knowing what heat to go at and not to use so much heat that you distort the entire part, which that's really the biggest thing. I've seen guys bring cases to me that they took to other shops that the cases were, out at over 1/8 of an inch, where it's just they're not savable anymore at that point. So make sure you know who you're taking it to, or even that, if you're going to try this on your own, which if you know how to weld, I tell you, go for it. Try to find some cracked cylinder or something cracked that's made out of similar cast aluminum, and weld on that first to learn. Even a lot of machining equipment, I would never weld on a customer's stuff first. Like I'll have a junk cylinder to set up a new boring bar or something like that, just to make sure I don't scrap somebody else's nice stuff. Alright, so this section's clean. Now we're going to clean the outside where the cracked area is. So I'm just using brake clean at first, and then when I go back for the final cleaning, I'll actually use acetone. Alrighty. Right. Plug the grinder in. Or not. I guess that grinder took a crap on me. There we go. There we go. There is the outside where that one crack is, where the hole's missing. Then we will go back on the inside. Alrighty. So now we got both the inside and outside prepped for weld. So now we're going to take some acetone. Clean the entire area. Now on the inside you saw there was a little crack, but I grinded a whole bunch. The main reason is this rod was riding, pushing on the cases. So what ends up happening with aluminum is it welds really, really well when it's just aluminum, but it doesn't weld well when there's contaminants. So that rod pushing into the cases contaminates the metal. So you want to try to get that surface off, and it'll help the weld. So when I go to weld these cases, what I will do is I will weld them from the outside first, and then I will go back in and I will weld them from the inside back into this weld. And then I will come back on the outside and check again to make sure I didn't deform this. Now the tricky thing with that is you have to weld these with them bolted together so that it doesn't warp on you. So it can be a little tricky to get to the inside and outside. Sometimes you have to just weld them on the outside. And then just clean the inside up because there's no way to get there with a torch. Luckily these, because the motor they are, you have a fairly straight shot to stick the torch in the reed area. So that is them prepped. The next video we'll have the welder out. Alright, so now let's get her bolted back together and ready to weld. So this is a really, really important step. As I said before, aluminum has a huge tendency of warping when you weld it. So if you don't keep it bolted together when you do it, it can get really, really wonky on you. And you'll kind of defeat the whole purpose of repairing the cases. So I'm just going to start each thread, get a couple threads, so that way I can use the impact to send her home without cross threading anything. And then we're just going to quickly torque these just so it's all an even pressure on the cases. It's not necessarily needed as long as they're bolted together, but I take the quick extra step of doing it just to make sure nothing's going to bite you back in the end. You know, if you torque it all the way it's going to be put back together, you know when it's put back together it's going to be right. So as far as welders, you know, when you're welding aluminum, you need an AC/DC TIG welder. The welder I have, although I've had larger, I have a Lincoln 350DX, and I also have an Eastwood 200 AC/DC TIG, which that's what I'm going to be using in this video. I've been very impressed. I've had my Eastwood TIG for about 3 years now, and it's really worked flawlessly. I've welded a ton of stuff with it. For the money, it really can't be beat. So I'm just going to put these at 19 pounds each. I'm going to go to 8 for the 10. For the 10, sorry, I said 6 for the 10. So I'm only going to do the couple in this area. because it's really not going to end up moving the rest, and the rest is tight. Alright, so we got all that together. Now we're going to get ready to weld. So this is the torch I use. I use a stubby end so I can get inside the reed area when I go to weld it from the inside, which I'll do like this. So let's get cracking. So I will start off by just striking an arc and moving around the area, which will get heat into the part. And then I'll start welding, just so you know what I'm doing. So on this, I'm just building up the corners, so then I can link it together. Alrighty, so now we will flip her over and check her from the inside. So now we're going to let it cool. And that's really it. What I found, what I end up doing, instead of having a nice bead, I just wash over my welds as I'm doing them. It's the way I've done cases. Not saying it's right or wrong. It's just the way I do it. Let me see if I can get from the inside so you can see. When I take them apart, I'll show you pictures of it. But that's really all you need to know about it. Alright guys, so here we go. You can see the finished repair. The one thing I do with my welds is I end up washing them. I found with castings in general, if you just do a standard bead weld where you see like a stack of dimes, you can end up with porosity in the corners just because of the crap that's in the casting. It's what I do. It's not saying one way or the other way is better. It's just what I do, and it's happened to work for me, and I don't have leaks. So I will run the beads, and then I will wash them back over in all the areas that I weld to make sure it ties into the aluminum in the corners. As I showed you before when I was welding it on the other side, through the inside, I will go through and I will wash it as well to make sure that you tie in the crack on the inside. And then I went through this with a sanding disc, a flap wheel, just to clean it up so you don't have any sharp edges where the crank's going to hit. And as you can see, it's basically as good as new. The one other thing I do for all these cases, because as I said, these castings aren't always completely clean. I use a product called Micro Seal. It's actually for castings. So when I'm done welding and I'm done cleaning it all up, I will paint this Micro Seal product on, which seals all the pores of the aluminum, and I've never had a leak. So it works great. Hope you guys liked the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Comment in the comments below. Tell us if there's any videos you guys want to see, and stuff like that. Thanks again for watching, and have a good evening.